Hello and welcome back. Today's topic is decolonization and genocide, specifically in the African country known as Rwanda. Now, ordinarily in class, we would have taken the time to watch the movie Hotel Rwanda, give you a little bit of background information, watch the movie, understand it a little bit better. Since we're at home, we're obviously not going to take the time to do that, but I do encourage you to learn more about this. Maybe even view the movie for yourself. All right, so let's give you a little bit of background on what was going on, and ultimately, how does this Cold War notion of decolonization play a role? This idea of imperialism, how does it play a role? Okay, so first off, we got to remember what genocide is. We've talked about this previously. Remember, we talked in Turkey after World War One. You had the Armenian genocide. It was systematic killing of one specific group of people. It could be because of a religion, an ethnicity, nationality. There's a lot of different reasons why, but you specifically target one group and as a government or as a military, we are going to kill that one group because they are that one specific group. Here in Rwanda, we're talking about a small country located right there in, like you could say Central Africa, you could say Eastern Africa, both would apply. Most of the genocide that we're talking about is going to take place in and around the capital city of Kigali. Um, Kigali is, if you want a reference for where it is going to actually be located near near Congo. You remember we talked previously about how the Belgians had an influence there. Well, the Belgians are going to have influence here as well. So, one other thing I want to make sure that we understand about Africa and this place is that Africa by itself is going to be easily the most ethnically diverse place in the world. Um, Rwanda is just a small part of that. If you look at this map, what this actually shows is the location of all the different ethnic groups that you would find throughout Africa. If you look at the boundaries that are drawn for the countries, these are boundaries that are drawn by Europeans for the purpose of what they were wanting their colonies for. For the most part, they pay little to no attention to ethnic boundaries. So when they draw these, you can see there's plenty of places where this ethnic group here is actually in one, two, three, four different countries. And they may be in countries with different ethnic groups they like, maybe in countries with different ethnic groups that they really don't like. For the most part, the Europeans really didn't pay much attention to that at all. Okay, so now that we've got that established, what specifically about Rwanda down here? There's going to be two primary groups that you're going to see here, the Hutus and the Tutsis. Okay, the Hutus are the majority population. They account for somewhere between 80 to 85% of the population in Rwanda. Now, most of these people are going to be poor farmers. They are going to be the larger class. They are going to be the poverty-stricken class. The other group, the Tutsis, they're going to be the minority. They make up about 14% of the population, but they are going to be wealthier. For the most part, they're going to be cattle ranchers, cattle herders, and they're ultimately going to wind up making more money from what they do than the Hutus will. When the Belgians come in, they recognize that, you know what, the Tutsis being such a small group, that would make them easier for the Belgians to control on their own. And because they're the wealthier class, they can kind of play on that and use the Tutsis to control the Hutus. So the Belgians are going to put things in place to put the Tutsis in charge. If you were to take a Tutsi and a Hutu person, you're really not going to be able to tell any kind of difference. Ethnically, there's not a big difference between them. Physically, there's not a big difference between them. The reality is, the only way that you would really be able to tell one group from another group was simply by looking at, okay, well, what do they do for a living? So, for the most part, you've got two different ethnic groups here that historically really they've gotten along. They haven't had any kind of problems with them. It's not until the Belgians come in that you see these problems arise, and that they even matter to these groups. Now, fighting on behalf of these groups, you have one group for the Tutsis called the RPF, or the Rwandan Patriotic Front. Once the Belgians leave in the 1960s, you see a situation happen where there's going to be some discrimination that's going to go on. The Tutsis are going to kind of leave, and then as refugees, they're going to come back. And this RPF is what's really going to lead them back into the country forcefully. So it's a Tutsi army, and it already existed, and it's going to become a big deal after their refugee status. Okay, so that's the RPF, the Rwandan Patriotic Front. This is more of an organized group. Okay, now the other side is what we're going to call the Interahamwe. Interahamwe, I believe is how you pronounce that. Okay, now this is going to be essentially a mob. In Kigali, you had the government kind of pushing buttons, trying to get the people to do more to discriminate against the Tutsis. So they get this mob together that is going to be sponsored by the government. They're going to be paid by the government, and the idea is, hey, we want to get a mob of Hutu people together to, handle the Tutsi problems, to get rid of the Tutsis from Rwanda. So you have the RPF for the Tutsis, and you have the Interahamwe for the Hutus. Um, the big difference here is that an organized military group is going to have leadership that is going to restrain it, that's going to restrict it, that's going to say, hey, we have to do things in a certain way. When you're talking about a mob is going to do whatever a mob wants to do, which is what leads to a lot of the genocide that you're ultimately going to see here. So, what exactly happens? How does it all, come to play? Well, first off, you understand that they are being imperialized. They are being colonized by the Belgians. The Belgians come in, like we said, they divide and conquer. They split the two groups up. They pit them against each other. That makes it easier to control both sides. They put the Tutsis in power, and ultimately are going to use them to control the Hutus. Okay, and then in 1960, that's when the Belgians are actually going to leave, and that's when the Hutus are going to kind of take power. They're going to come back in, and they're going to start to discriminate against the Tutsis. Hey, for a long, long time, the Tutsis discriminated against the Hutus, and now they see, hey, this is a chance, this is an opportunity for us to kind of turn the table and discriminate against the Tutsis. So up until the Belgians get there, for the most part, nobody cared what type of group you were. Now, because of the changes that have taken place, now you've got to have paperwork. You've got to have identification that says I am Hutu, I am Tutsi, and because of the discrimination going on, you could be asked to produce this at any time. And anybody who is caught without this during this genocide that's going to happen in 1994, that's going to be an excuse for them to ultimately, commit these acts of genocide. So how does it get going? How does it go from hey, we're going to discriminate against you to hey, we're going to actually commit acts of genocide and kill people? It starts with a plane crash. The Hutu president is on this plane. He's leaving Kigali, and it gets shot down. Now, here's the thing to understand: nobody really knows who it is that's responsible for this. In some cases, some people say, "Hey, you know what? It could have been the Tutsis. Why? Well, he was a Hutu, and the Tutsis are being discriminated against, so that's an excuse." Okay, but there are plenty of people that believe, you know what? It could have been the Hutu as well. There could have been people in the Hutu that decided, "Hey, we want to take this a step further. We don't want to have to live with the Tutsis anymore, and if we shoot this plane down, make it look like the Tutsis did it, man, that's a reason for us to go in and do whatever we want." So ultimately, the plane is shot down. There's an announcement that's made on the radio, and that ultimately is going to be the spark. That's going to be that announcement on the radio is what is like a call to action. And what happens because of that? Well, things like this. Children walking around the streets with machine guns. Scenes like this. This is a UN peacekeeper who is there to, try and keep things as peaceful as they can, but just mass destruction and loss of life around them. This is from after it's over. They are collecting weapons, and these are all just a big pile of machetes that people have been using to commit a lot of these acts. Here you see, a man holding his child who's been killed as a part of this Rwandan genocide. Somebody that has had some of those machetes used on him. He managed to survive, but he has the scars to show what's going to happen. And again, this all comes back to you have a group that's been discriminated against because of the Europeans that were there. Once the Europeans leave, now it's chaos that's left behind. The Rwandan genocide. I once again encourage you to do a little bit more research into it. Maybe watch the movie Hotel Rwanda. It's going to give you a different perspective on how we can live in a country like America and have such diversity.